Hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, friends. Now we are starting the Dr. S. Balaparameswara Rao Endowment Symposium. This symposium was instituted in the year 2001 with a donation by Dr. S. V. Adinarayana Rao Garu of 40,000 rupees per annum in honor of his brother Dr. S. Balaparameswara Rao. Dr. Balaparameswara Rao Garu had his schooling in West Godavari district, joined Andhra Medical College for MBBS and later MS General Surgery in AMC only. He was a brilliant student and winner of many medals. He was winner of Anderson Gold Medal in MS General Surgery when he joined Andhra Government Service, and then the DME Major K.N. Rao picked him for training in neurosurgery. Dr. Balaparameswara Garu spent a year with Professor B. Ramurthy and started Department of Neurosurgery at Visakhapatnam in April 1956. He had further training in UK and continued as professor in Visakhapatnam till 1974 when he moved to Hyderabad. He was methodical and meticulous in his surgical technique, and everybody knows about his discipline and his systematic approach. Everything he used to attend all sessions are well on time. Before everybody comes, he used to be there, even if it's the first early morning session also. And he established the Department of Neurosurgery at NIMS, and he was his first superintendent. He was a recipient of many awards, and notable among them was the B.C. Roy Award and FAMS. He was the president of Neurological Society of India in 1974 and a founder and honorary member of APNSA. He was awarded honorary doctorate by the NTR University of Health Sciences. This is briefly, and all of us know about him very well, and there is everybody knows about him, and he doesn't know much introduction. And now here we are all here to discuss about the problem because of which we are having in this rather than personal conference. So now this symposium, the first part of the symposium is neurological aspects and neurological complications, neurological manifestations of COVID infection. The speaker is our professor and head of the Department of Neurology, Andhra Medical College, Visakhapatnam, Dr. G. Buchiraju, who is well known to me and very good friend of me for the past so many decades. He was a student in AMC. He was our junior. He was a very good student. And then he did his MD General Medicine and DM Neurology from All India Institute of Medical Sciences. He was very disciplined and he used to present most papers, and he has got put some significant publications in various journals. He's interested in neuromuscular disorders and epilepsy. He has taught. I mean, he's in teaching line, and he's teaching number of postgraduates. You all know, and he's an examiner for DM. And then his publications were there in several articles. And most importantly, he is heading the department in KGH, where one of the biggest COVID unit is there in the state. So I expect him to talk about the general manifestations of neurological manifestations of COVID and their experience in particular. I request Dr. Buchiraju to start his lecture, please.
You could able to hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. At the outset, I thank Dr. Prabhakar for the wonderful introduction of a good friend. And I also to thank the organizing committee of the AP Neurocon 2020, Dr. Venkatraju, and also the executive committee of APNSA for asking me to speak on one of the recent problems, that is the neurological manifestations of COVID. So we are all having this, as Dr. Prabhakar has mentioned, this meet on digital platform only because of COVID. So to start with, in the first editorial by Dr. Avindranath in the Green Neurology in May, he mentioned one quote by William Osler, which he mentioned in 1896, that humanity has but three great enemies. Uh, the three enemies are fever, famine, and war. And out of all these three, the fever is the most terrible. Maybe during those times, the pandemic, influenza pandemic, and all that. So even now, even so much of development, both in developed and under developing countries, we are facing this pandemic, and this has created some panic, fear, even both in health workers and also patients, politicians, and even in the financial markets. So this William Osler's statement in 1896, even in 2020, holds good for all of us. So as you all know, the initial neurological manifestations or complications of coronavirus were very few which were described in May, June in the literature. These are the few conditions which have been described initially. But later on, I'll show you it. It affects the all parts of nervous system. Initially, there is doubt whether there is any does coronavirus a neurotropism or not. We'll see how it had unfolded in last 6 months. This graph, I think everybody are aware. As you see here, the neurological complications have been described even before in the incubation period, and even after the actual infection, post-infectious period, and even sometimes in the long COVID what we are describing nowadays. So as you all aware that it's a RNA virus. SARS-CoV-2 is a RNA virus with a membrane and also three spike protein. And you all aware that the spike protein attaches to ACE2 receptors. So as ACE2 receptors are very much in the lung, so mostly the effect is on the lung. But we all are aware that the ACE2 receptors are also expressed in the several tissues, including brain. The receptors are also present on the neurons, microglia, and also the oligodendrocytes, and even in the several parts of the brain, as you see in this diagram. The main issue initially we thought was how come a respiratory or a infection or a flu which causes flu affects the nervous system. So initial thought was most of the problems of nervous system are due to metabolic or hypoxia induced by the predominant involvement of the lung. But in last few 6 months, we could able to appreciate the pathogenesis or how the SARS-CoV-2 affects the brain. The most predominant transmissions are, one is through the olfactory nerve, because the cribriform plate, as you all aware, olfactory nerve doesn't have, so through the olfactory system and retrograde transmission affecting the brain, and the other is through the vascular system. So as is seen in herpes and other neurotrophic viruses, this coronavirus affects the olfactory bulb, and through the endocytosis and retrograde pathway with transsynaptic passage, it goes into the affects the brain. That's the one of the uh, theories which have been described for the pathogenesis. The other important aspect is, as you know, the virus is everywhere in the body, including the blood. So the ACE receptors are also there in the endothelium. So it directly affects the SARS-CoV-2 affects directly the endothelium. And the other way of is when there is a blood-brain barrier breakage, the SARS-CoV-2 also affects the macrophages and the leukocytes. So by a Trojan horse, what we describe as a Trojan horse mechanism, the SARS-CoV-2 through the barrier can enter the brain and affecting the different parts of the. So SARS-CoV-2 also as a neurotropic is one of the important viruses, mRNA virus, which affects the brain and also the peripheral nervous system. So this is the basically what happens, even though in many of the conditions like in 80 to 90%, COVID is a very mild illness, but even in spite of mild illness, it has a lot of immunological manifestations uh, which can be seen because we see there's significant lymphocytopenia, changes in the interleukin, ferritin, LDH, and all that. And this is a cascade of events which happen to cause cytokine storm and also affecting the multiple inflammatory syndrome, both in children and adults. Anybody interested, there is a very good, beautiful review article on cytokine storm in NEJ, recent NEJM. This diagram was taken from that. So I already mentioned that COVID affects directly or indirectly the brain and also the peripheral nervous system. And the common neurological manifestations can be divided broadly into the central nervous system manifestations and the peripheral nervous manifestations. But in view of the pandemic, the the SARS-CoV-2 infections are seen throughout the world in both the developed, underdeveloped, or developing world, and because of its multifactorial pathogenic mechanism, COVID-19 poses a global threat to the entire nervous system. So it can affect both in delivery of neurological services because of lockdown and several other, most of our personnel have been posted to the COVID wards, and in that way the delivery mechanism is affected, and also directly the COVID affects both the central and peripheral nervous system. So these are the several manifestations and their pathogenic mechanisms for COVID, which I will be dealing with in each symptom. So as I already mentioned, the approximate timeline from the positive diagnostic test, the neurological manifestations, as I already mentioned before, even the onset of the symptoms in the incubation period, and also in the first 2 weeks when the patient is infectious or in the post-infectious period. So this is one of the earliest diagrams which have been published in the Green Neurology, where we can see here the scan of a encephalitis. This went on viral in most of the WhatsApp messages, that is a EDM-like manifestation, and also the strokes. So this is actually a slide taken from one of the systematic review and meta-analysis. As you see here, the symptoms and the signs of neurological affection is seen in several ways, like you see in tuberculosis, syphilis previously. So it can affect both the CNS and peripheral nervous system, and the non-specific manifestations which are quite common in most of these patients, like myalgia, headache, dizziness, and lightheadedness. But all the manifestations which you see in are what we call the phenotypes of disorders are seen both in central and peripheral nervous system. This is unending. If you see if you search for whatever the manifestations COVID has been, whether it is directly or indirectly causing that type of phenotypic presentation. So I'll start with the common manifestation. These days, anybody who comes with headache without any previous history to suggest primary headache, we have to suspect possibility of COVID, because sometimes patients may have fever, cold and cough, or they may present predominantly with headache. Or it could be a manifestation of a major illness like meningitis, encephalitis, or even raised ICT secondary to other causes of COVID causing several manifestations involving the CNS. The main mechanism described is because of increased cytokines and chemokines that trigger the nociceptive sensory neurons, which cause headache. And so these days, if a patient had a new onset headache and from a area, you may have to suspect COVID. So the other common manifestation which has been described, as you all aware, which actually are the cardinal features of COVID, and if they are present individually also, they consider to be COVID infection. That is the anosmia, loss of smell, and ageusia, or loss of taste. And initial series from China have shown only a 5 to 6% prevalence, but many studies have shown quite significant. Actually, some studies from Germany showed nearly 80 to 85% of patients have either anosmia or agousia. And a meta-analysis have shown that anosmia is seen in around 55%. And actually, one study, I'll just show some of the images. 20 patients from France were studied for both mean olfactory score and the changes on the olfactory tract on imaging. Beautiful images were there, which were published in Green Neurology. I'll follow it up. And as I already mentioned, the pathogenesis, because olfactory now directly is affected because of the transcribiform root. Olfactory now doesn't have the endothelial covering, which is protective. So it is in the direct attack. So anosmia is quite a common problem. And also the COVID-19 spike S proteins binding to sialic acid containing the glycoproteins and ganglioside on cell surface will is probably explains the anosmia and also the agousia. And we also saw a lot of new cases of Bell's palsy these days, and probably the same pathogenic mechanism of cranial mononeuropathies, which are seen in this situation, probably is one of the explanation for cause of Bell's palsy, more account of Bell's palsy these days. Actually, these are the pictures from the study which I mentioned from France, which showed the swelling of the olfactory bulb and olfactory nerve on imaging. And one study which was published in Journal of Neurological Sciences, they compared all patients of COVID who have anosmia and no anosmia. And peculiarly, they found that patients who have anosmia have done well, much better than patients who doesn't have uh, anosmia. So whether it is on the presence of coma, maybe it's because of comorbid conditions or the immunological response of the patient. So patients with anosmia have done much better, both in terms of morbidity, mortality, and without anosmia. Maybe patients who had a good immunological response have just had anosmia, and other manifestations are more common seen in patients without anosmia. The next common feature which have been seen is altered sensorium in many of these patients. And as you all aware, it's the common cause could be because of hypoxia secondary to respiratory involvement, or it could be due to metabolic encephalopathy. Many of these patients are diabetic, nutritional problems in a special COVID isolation wards. So any metabolic encephalopathy, or it may be due to a direct, as already mentioned, direct effect of the brain causing encephalitis. I mean, some of these patients also have seizures, so postictal or due to a vascular cause like stroke or a or a demyelination or acute dissemination and post-infectious demyelination syndrome. So encephalitis have been described in few cases, and occasional case reports are there where SARS-CoV-2 virus has also been isolated from in some autopsy series and also from CSF, but there are very few cases. And the necrotizing encephalitis and hemorrhagic encephalitis also have been described. And it can be, the encephalitis presentation can be seen at onset or within 2 weeks. Most of these study cases are within 2 weeks. And MRI showing diffusion restriction or changes in the temporal lobe, hippocampal and periventricular region. And most of the management is by supportive therapy, and some studies have shown that the high dose steroid has shown some benefit in these patients. These are the initial MRIs of those patients which have been published, which are showing both temporal hyperintensity and also the occipital and periventricular white matter hyperintensities. This is one of our patients, actually, Dr. Soumya has presented in the morning as a case report. This patient, middle-aged man, presented to us with focal occipital seizures, peculiar focal occipital seizures in one hemifield. And even though he is diabetic, even after control of diabetic, the seizures haven't controlled. There, on questioning, he had some history of fever a few 2 weeks prior to the onset of the seizures. And this MRI showing periventricular, sorry, in the occipital, something like a cortical ribbon appearance in one side of the occipital region. And his antibodies are strongly positive for COVID. And EEG also showed some changes in the occipital region. And this This patient has done very well with steroids and anti-epileptic drugs. Then the other common manifestation, central nervous manifestation, is acute disseminated encephalomyelitis, which is a syndrome of multifocal demyelination, mostly because of post-infectious demyelination immunological reaction. There are quite a significant number of case reports with multifocal involvement, both in adults and children. Peculiarly, these people have done with very good with immunotherapy, especially with high-dose steroid. Uh, Poor prognosis is seen in patients who have necrotizing or hemorrhagic. These are small 3 case reports from Neurology India, which was published uh, from Neurology India. These 3 are from US, showing ADM. They've shown these changes both in the posterior fossa and also in the uh, middle cranial fossa with periventricular changes, and also changes in the corpus callosum, like we see in uh, multiple sclerosis. So ADM presentation is quite commonly described, and some of these done very well with steroids. This is another study which has been published in again in Green Neurology with leukoencephalopathy or white matter significant changes, especially in critically ill patients in COVID. They have reported 4 cases. Some of these patients are on prolonged ventilation. Maybe some changes could be because of hypoxia. Some may be secondary to the immunological post-immune manifestations. And you see, as you can see in the MRI, significant changes in the periventricular region. The other common manifestation is seen in quite a good number of patients, in 10 to 15%, especially who are admitted to ICU, are seizures. The seizures could be, most of them are new onset seizures, could be due to metabolic, vascular, or hypoxia, or even directly involving the brain causing encephalitis. Or it could be increased incidence of or non-epileptic seizures increased, maybe because of many of our patients, they couldn't get the drug, or many of the hospitals are closed. Patients who are especially coming to government hospital uh, because of lack of transport, lockdown. So some of these patients could have missed the complaints, maybe poor, so new onset increase in seizures. But many of these COVID illness patients had seizures in 10% of the patients. We also had our residents have gone and asked to see patients, and patients had seizures in quite good number of patients, both in WIMS and in the COVID ward. And also probably epilepsy patients, because they are mostly confined to the home, and also because of lockdown. So psychosocial issues due to lockdown may, and also affecting the general neurological services, could have cause for increased seizures during this period. This again 2 case reports of de novo status epilepticus. Actually, they presented like a status epilepticus in COVID, and this is published in Annals of Clinical and Translational Neurology. As you see here, one is showing classical status ictal rhythm. The other patient presented with PLEDS, generalized PLEDS. So these 2 patients, they have done quite badly in spite of aggressive management. Then the other common thing which have been seen is COVID-19 and stroke. So the concept, whether it is just an incidental or triggered by the COVID infection, or it's really COVID causing stroke. As you are aware, many of these patients have risk factors, like elderly people have risk factors like diabetes, hypertension, and obesity, could have caused stroke. And also cardiovascular disease because of increased D dimers, and the COVID also causing COVID cardiovascular manifestations could have secondarily affected causing embolic strokes. And already mentioned about, highlighted about the risk factors which are present in this COVID patient in after 4th decade. Or it may be because of the inflammatory response by the COVID, as already mentioned about the inflammatory reaction, which has been immunological response due to COVID, could have increased the risk of stroke. And as already the COVID-19 also can affect directly the endothelium due to the ACE, which is quite significantly present in endothelium, and also the Trojan horse effect with blood-brain barrier disruption. The COVID directly affecting the central nervous system can cause stroke. And a prothrombic state has been described with COVID, like ferritin is increased, D dimers have increased in quite a good number of patients, could have prone to stroke. So this is the same thing which has been given in the pictorial diagram. This again was published in a good review article has been published in Annals of Indian Academy of Neurology. So in many of the series, strokes are seen in around 5% of patients who had COVID illness. Most of them are ischemic. Occasional patients with hemorrhagic and even cerebral venous thrombus have been affected. The major issue has been that strokes have occurred in young people and also without any significant risk factors or comorbid factors. I already highlighted the multifactorial causes, elevated inflammatory markers like increased leukocyte count, decreased lymphocytopenia, increased CRP, ferritin, and LDH, and also increased D-dimer causing hypercoagulability. So and also associated metabolic and hemodynamic factors could have, like hypotension, also could have caused stroke. And the management and prognosis depends on the cause of the stroke and the significant and how large is the impact. This is one of the largest series of stroke in COVID, which was published by Global COVID-19 Stroke Registry in Stroke Journal. This is from 16 countries and 28 sites. They have described in 174 patients in the median age. Most of them are men in around 60%, women are females. When compared to similar group of non-COVID, these patients have a higher NHS stroke score with a significant p-value of 0.03, with the NHS score was 10, and the disability, like modified Rankin score, is quite significantly bad when compared to the other similar group of patients, stroke patients without COVID, and the mortality and morbidity also quite high. Just to Before I go to the peripheral nervous system, even acute hypokinetic rigid syndrome has been described as SARS-CoV-2 infection, and even these people have even demonstrated the involvement of the basal ganglia with the DAT scan. Recently, we had one patient who had also had a kinetic mutism with significant rigidity, had high antibodies titer. We are still investigating whether he had any other cause for this hyperkinetic rigid syndrome. So up till now, I have discussed about the CNS manifestations. COVID also affects the peripheral nervous system, and the commonest one, as you all aware, are GB syndrome, post-infectious demyelination. And more than 50 cases, this is only a month ago, more than 50 cases have been described in several literature. Maybe many of them have not been published. And this pathogenesis which have been thought due to causing GB syndrome is SARS-CoV-2 dual receptor attachment, spike proteins like sialic acid containing glycoproteins, gangliosides, and cell surfaces. And also maybe because of the molecular mimicry in which infecting virus likely share epitopes which stimulates autoreactive T cells, causing immune manifestations and post-infectious demyelination in the affected patients. So the GB syndrome has been seen in the first two weeks or even prior to the onset of the infection. And peculiarly in some of the series, the common ganglioside antibodies which have been shown is GD1B. And prognosis was quite good in many of these patients with IVIG or IV steroid. So this is one of the meta-analysis or a systematic review which was published in Journal of JNNP recently. In the first 6 months of pandemic, they have described around 42 patients and the different characteristics of this GB syndrome in these patients. The only peculiarity to highlight is Miller-Fisher syndrome is seen quite significantly in good number of patients, in 10 to 15%. We had seen two cases. This is one of our patients who had admitted with flaccid quadriparsis, had history of some fever 1 month ago. He had 2 to 3 weeks of quadriparsis, and this patient on NC had Ansan variant. And when we done RT-PCR, it was COVID was positive, and he was shifted to COVID ward, but has done very well with IV methylprednisolone. This is a very recent patient I have seen in my clinic 2 weeks ago. Patient presented with weakness of both legs with bilateral foot drop, but weakness of both dorsiplantar flexors and some weakness, proximal muscle weakness in the lower limbs. And power in the upper limbs are normal. and NCV showed something like Aman variant involving both common peroneals and PTNs. And when we started looking at the antibodies, it was quite significant. Antibodies are significantly raised. IgG antibodies are more than nearly 30, when it should be normal, should be less than 10. This is another patient actually from Rajahmundry. Uh, Tomorrow we are presenting in the case reports. It's a complete case report. Very interesting case. Actually, Green Neurology has published one case report of as a clinical vignette of pharyngocervicobrachial variant of GBS presenting with COVID. Our patient also had 2 months, like 1.5 2 months history of bilateral facial weakness, bulbar symptoms, and significant weakness of both upper limbs. But the peculiarity is she had a significant weakness of one upper limb when compared to other. It's quite a gross asymmetric weakness in the upper limbs and normal power in the lower limbs, but deep tendon jerks are absent. And the CSF was showing cytoalveological dissociation. Antiganglioside antibodies are negative, and this our patient also had positive SARS-CoV-2 antibody. This is the patient's MRI and MRI of the brain and cervical spine already, which was done in Rajahmundry, were normal, and NCV had shown changes in all the four limbs, predominantly affecting the waves and suggesting a proximal involvement, and also the lower limbs CMAP amplitudes are reduced in median, and all the snaps are absent, and the CO, the antibodies are quite significantly raised, more than around 55. So we are seeing a typical presentation. So if you look at all the GBS and try to do antibodies, maybe many of these patients may have COVID or exposed to COVID, and most of these patients doesn't have a symptoms or signs of COVID illness actually. Already highlighted some patients presented with predominantly cranial nerve involvement. Already highlighted about the anosmia, agousia, ophthalmoplegia, also seen ataxia, a Miller-Fisher variant of GBS. Some patients had predominantly polyneuritis cranialis with absent reflexes and CSF showing cytoalveological dissociation. And most of these patients had anti-GD1B immunoglobulin antibody. Probably this is all because of immune mechanisms or direct viral neuropathogens affecting the cranial nerves. So atypical variants of GB syndrome, predominantly like polyneuritis cranialis, have been described with COVID-19. Similarly, this is case reports published in Green Neurology. Patients presenting with predominantly only ophthalmoparesis as the feature, and COVID is both CO2 was positive, and they have demonstrated quite beautifully on imaging the involvement of the 346 nerves on imaging. Then coming to the last manifestations is muscle. So COVID also causes myopathy or myositis. Many of our patients, or even patients who have experienced COVID, had significant myalgias in nearly 10% of the patients, and total CPK is raised in many of these. And typical like presentation like inflammatory muscle disease have been described, so causing viral myositis, and occasional case of necrotizing myopathy and rhabdomyolysis have been described. So the peculiarity is probably it's the first virus which may affect the muscle fibers directly, because the skeletal muscle also expresses ACE2 inhibitor. So the SARS-2 CO2 can affect directly the muscles, causing myositis and sometimes severe rhabdomyolysis. So as already mentioned about the immune-mediated body response to COVID illness. And these people have done well with steroids and IVIG. Just to go to illustrate several other features. For example, children, even though we know children are not commonly affected, this is a very recent publication in Lancet Child Health showing neurological neuroimaging manifestation. As you see, the encephalitic pattern in some of the patients, the cranial nerve involvement in some of these patients, and vascular manifestations. And some patients had COVID illness with this patient had a tuberculous meningitis. One patient had a viral like cytomegalovirus infection, and some patients presented with these are all in children. Even though the COVID illness is children quite less, but neurological manifestations have been described even in children. As you see, the myelitis presentation, myositis presentation, And the last one is the corpus callosal involvement, posterior corpus callosal involvement, something like ADM presentation. Some people have tried to look at the CSF, even though we tried in few patients, mostly they are post-COVID, but very few people have been tried to do CSF in the real COVID because most of these are in isolation. People are afraid to do a lumbar puncture, but Germany, from 6 centers, they have done in 30 patients in several different types of presentation. CSF is nearly normal, a slight increase in cells is seen in nearly 28. And cytoalbuminal dissociation, cytoalbuminal proteins elevated in nearly 5 patients, and none of the patients they couldn't demonstrate SARS-CoV-2 virus. But there are several few case reports where SARS-CoV-2 virus have been extracted from CSF. Then the initial thought was whether these are all systemic factors or the CNS is directly affected. This is one paper in Green Neurology which showed that if you see the neurochemical evidence of the astrocytic neuronal injury also seen in COVID, like they have shown that the glial fibril acidic protein and also the neurofilament light chain protein is quite significantly elevated in these patients, especially in patients who are in moderate or severe illness. So it again indicates that SARS-CoV-2 has a neurotropism and can affect the nervous system, both central and peripheral directly. And also to highlight, even in Germany, they have done, this is a report published in Lancet Neurology, post-autopsy was done in nearly 43 patients. And they have demonstrated different changes in several parts of the brain, both central and peripheral nervous system. As you see here down, some patients, these are all violet. Also, they have demonstrated the SARS-CoV-2 even in the autopsy specimens. So indicating that SARS-CoV-2 also has a significant neurotropism and can affect the nervous system. This is the only study which I have seen from India, which is published in Annals of Indian Academy of Neurology from Indore, which have shown that out of 391 patients, they had nearly 10% patients had neurological manifestations. As in other situations, they have common causes is gauche, anosmia, headache, vertigo, cognitive, stroke in few number of patients. There are so many series actually. If you go into the literature every week, somebody or other publishing neurological manifestations. The only thing, recent one which I'm highlighting because this is the largest study which have been from New York. Several hospitals have present. This is a prospective study from few months. Out of 12,000 patients, this is from 12,000 COVID patients. They have demonstrated neurological manifestations in nearly in around 13% of the patients, and they have compared patients who had neurological disorder prior to admission and after admission. And patients who have neurological manifestation post-admission have done much worse when compared to prior to admission. And these are the different, like as I already highlighted, different pathologies, phenotypes which have been neurological, like encephalopathy, stroke. Stroke is in this series also they have seen in around 8% of the patients. Fewer hypoxic ischemic injury, neuropathy, myopathy, and GBS. These are the several phenotypic presentation of neurological manifestations. Just before I conclude, this is actually a meta-analysis which was published in Neurological Sciences. It is done by a group from PGI and Banaras Hindu University. They have taken nearly 7,000 articles and in their meta-analysis, they have shown the prevalence of neurological manifestations reported from systemic assessment. As you see here, the common causes like anosmia, ageusia seen in 30%, headache quite common, myalgias, altered sensorium in around 6%. This is the full series out of all the meta-analysis. And the same thing in meta-analysis summary estimate of pooled. This is a pooled prevalence of different manifestations in the patients with COVID. And the same thing with individual abnormalities is Foster plot, so which was published in Neurological Sciences recently. So this MIS syndrome is quite commonly, like Kawasaki syndrome was quite commonly described in children. But the MIS-A is also associated, like adults also associated in SARS-CoV-2. There are some case reports with multi-system inflammatory syndrome, in which even the nervous system is also affected. Uh, so this is the criteria which was given for the MIS-A, like severe illness requiring hospitalization with CO, SARS, COVID illness about 21 years, positive report, either antigen or antibody, severe dysfunction of one or more extrapulmonary and laboratory evidence of severe inflammation like increased CRP, ferritin, LDH and other conditions, and absence of severe respiratory illness. So these patients group, there are some case reports with MIS-A. So these are the last few slides. So as you all aware, even though COVID is mostly acute, but there are some patients who have done what we call long haul COVID or a long tail COVID. Most of these presentations are autonomic symptoms like tachycardia with mild exercise or standing, night sweats, myalgias, temperature dysregulation, gastroparesis, constipation. Some people had diarrhea and peripheral vasoconstriction. These are quite common. The other one, which was very interesting, is the brain fog, which you must have seen even in lay press and most of the WhatsApp messages. Many of these patients had some memory disturbances following COVID illness, which may have lasted for few weeks to even few months. So a lot of we need to study much better what is the main pathogenesis. As already mentioned, the direct effect of CO2 or neurotrophic CNS may have caused this brain fog. Whether it has only a temporary effect or a permanent effect, the long-term studies have to be shown. The other main common thing which I have seen in many of my colleagues and also even personal experience is chronic fatigue syndrome. Many of these patients who had COVID had a significant fatigue which lasted for a month or two. Some of my medical colleagues have called us, so we are having both lot of fatigue and lack of interest in work, both maybe psychological or also even physical, in many of the patients who had COVID illness. And the other common thing which you all are aware of is the post-traumatic stress disorder, any trauma causing a stress disorder, and COVID being a much more significant pandemic which has caused, changed our lives, has caused a significant number of people causing post-traumatic stress disorder. What are the etiopathogenesis for this long haul COVID? Maybe the COVID illness is unmasking the comorbidities like diabetes, hypertension. Many of these patients are elderly, are even obese. Could be due to long haul, maybe good due to residual damage. Already mentioned the COVID, SARS-CoV-2 affects the different tissues, both the central, in neurology, both central and peripheral. So it could cause residual damage from acute infection. Or it's still, we are not aware whether there is any persistent or restricted viral replication, because some of the patients are into the illness, have symptoms even after first month, second month. We saw some patients who had significant mortality even after 4 weeks. I've seen in one of my resident who is coming, both the in-laws have died on one day after 1 month. We don't know whether it is because of the vascular events which have been occurring in these patients. And also the persistent immune activation which is there still persisting even though these patients are not infective. The immunological effect is seen in quite a good number of patients for a few weeks. Still, we have to know the real cause for this long haul COVID. So this is just to highlight the neurological manifestations. So we are in this pandemic, we are not far, we are also part of this. So actually the problem with having some data is most of these patients are in isolation, whether they are COVID specialized wards. So most of these are manned by the MBBS or even general medical. So we have to see the records and get some idea of how many of these patients had both. We see mostly the post-COVID or patient who had significant changes like altered sensorium, patient presenting with seizures or stroke. So we need to collect some data and try to, and recently KIMS, Dr. Vijay has published 50 patients who had neurological manifestation in this series from KIMS Hospital, Rajwaka. So I think most of us have seen quite significant neurological manifestation, both central and peripheral with COVID. So I once again thank the organizers, Dr. Venkatraju and also the APNSA uh, executive for giving me this opportunity and to be with you and talking on neuro.